Have a good meeting.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm Chair, Councilwoman Sage Turner, and I'd like to welcome you to the Thursday, February 10th, Asheville Regional Housing Consortium meeting. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through committee meetings a bit differently. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub on the front page of the city's website. You can also find it on our committee page. We also have an option for the public to listen and comment live by phone, and that is by calling 855-925-2801. You'll be prompted for a code, and that meeting code is 8763. For those of you out there listening today, welcome. I do have a couple announcements before we jump into roll call. We have some changes on the consortium, so we welcome Nathan Pennington from Buncombe County. He'll be taking Andrew Mayrone's spot. We'll welcome Jennifer Miranda with Henderson County, and she'll be taking Sonia Flynn's spot. And then we've also learned that Alex Carmichael with Montreat will not be able to attend this meeting, and he has changed positions and has moved to Laurel Park in Henderson County and will no longer be a part of the consortium. Okay, so I'm going to go through roll call now. And if you could just unmute yourself and say here or present. With the City of Asheville, Ben Woody.
Good morning, everyone. Here.
Town of Black Mountain, Archie Pertiller.
Here.
Matthew Cable with the county.
Here.
Nate Pennington. Not sure if he was able to join us. I don't think I saw him get on yet. He's new, so I'll reach out to him. William High, sorry. All right, William is not present. Jennifer Miranda.
Present.
Thank you and welcome. Jacob Comper.
Present.
Thank you. Tyler Henry.
I know he's no longer with the city in Hendersonville anymore. I don't know if they're going to replace him with anybody.
Okay, job changes left and right. Well, okay, I'll make that note. No more Tyler Henry. Okay, thank you for that update. With Madison County, Forrest, are you with us today?
Present.
Thank you. Karen. Karen Kina. Marked absent. All right. Eric Rufa is not here. We have an alternate. How about Mayor Blakely?
Here.
Thank you. Almost called you councilman. Robin Merrill.
Good morning. I'm here.
Thank you. Adrian Eisenhower. Not with us today. Jason Young. Not with us today. Allie McNeil. And lastly, Kate Hayes is an alternate.
Morning.
Thank you. Okay. Let's go on to the next item here. Just a second. All right, so we have a couple things to do. We're going to review. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes? It was October that we last met. There is a link on your agenda. If there are no changes or amendments, if I could get a motion. Anybody want to make a motion?
Move to approve. This is Ben.
Thank you, Ben. How about a second?
I'll second that. Jacob here. Jacob Comfort.
That was Jacob? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. And we have to do a roll call vote for all these virtual meetings. So I'm going to say your names again. All right. Ben Woody.
Yes.
Archie.
Yes.
Matt Cable.
Yes.
Oh gosh, was Williams not here, right? Second. Jennifer.
Yes.
Jacob.
Yes.
Forrest.
Yes.
No Karen. Second. Mayor Blakely.
Yes.
Robin.
Yes.
And Kate, I suppose as an alternate, you will be present and voting today. Kate?
Yes.
And Jason Young was not here. Okay, that's it. We have recorded, we have completed the minutes. The next thing I want to mention, though, is about these minutes in general. So at the City of Asheville, we have been, since we're virtual, we feel like we're doing a little double time, keeping someone on staff typing everything while it's being recorded and doing the minutes that way. So we have moved most of our, I think all of our other boards and commissions to what we're calling action minutes, which is kind of just highlights points in the video so that you could go back, because we're short staffed right now. We don't have anybody to take these long, expressive letter-like notes. So, pending any concerns about that, that's how we would like to proceed until we're back in person and have more staffing. Does anybody have a concern about that? Okay, great. So I think that's just what we're going to move into in this time. I know at Buncombe County, I know they're looking at lifting the mask mandate in February, and the city is, and the city actually is going back to in-person meetings with its council in 2 weeks. So maybe we'll be seeing each other in person sooner than we think. All right, well, thanks for working with us on that. We'll make it easier for us. Next item is to just review your data, your personal information on that sheet. If you have any changes, you can email them to me. We just want to make sure we have everybody's updated information. As you can see, there's a lot of changes. Okay, and that moves us into the next item. We're welcoming Buncombe County today with some exciting information and presentation. And who is the lead for Buncombe County on that? Who's going to be starting that?
I'm going to be giving the presentation.
Okay, hi Shannon. It's nice to have you here today.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we're ready if you are.
Okay, I'd like to share my screen. Let's see. This is always the scariest part. So let's see if it shows you the right one. Yep, there we go.
First try, nice job.
Okay, so again, I'm Shannon Capizzali, and I'm a planner with the Buncombe County Planning Department. And I'm just here to ask you all about your group's top interest areas for the county's comprehensive plan. So I'm going to be asking you for some of your big ideas that you'd like the county to include in this 20-year plan, and just kind of going through what that means exactly. There we go. So we're going to start by briefly just going over what the plan is, what the timeline and the process will be like to create the plan. And then I'm going to actually guide you all through the stakeholder survey questions for your organization. So the information that you share with me today, we're going to plug that in, and that will be kind of the official survey results for your group today. So if we have questions, I'll have time in just a minute to kind of answer some of those. But first, how much do you all know about the county's comprehensive plan? Have you had any updates? Have you had a presentation yet?
We have not. Anecdotally, I've been following around, but this consortium has not.
Okay.
And I ask you, I have your, can you put that onto the full presentation screen so we can see it better?
I can, and then we'll be, I'm actually going to be editing these slides in a minute, so we will go back into.
No worries. If you need to do it that way, that's fine.
Okay, there's just a couple of these, and then we'll get into kind of that interactive mode. But just a big picture overview, a comprehensive plan is a document that's created by the local government. So the city has one, many of the towns inside of the county have ones, as well as counties around us. And it's a long-range planning tool, so it looks 20 years into the future. And what we're trying to do is envision what residents want the county to be like over time. So the purpose of the plan is to identify the community's needs and to try to figure out ways that we can work towards addressing those needs. So we are going to be working, and we have been working with the community throughout the process to gather their ideas, to kind of hear about what the challenges are. A lot of this stuff we already know about. We've had a lot of plans in the past, but ideas and needs change over time. So every 20 years, you're really supposed to kind of dig deep and see how that vision for the community has changed. And the county has never actually had a comprehensive plan. We've been working off of a comprehensive land use plan, which is a lot more focused, whereas this comprehensive plan is going to have a much broader view and cover a lot more different topic areas. So once this plan is adopted by the commissioners, the goal is to use it to help guide growth into the future for county areas and to collaborate with the towns and jurisdictions around us. So just to give you kind of an idea of how it works or kind of where it fits into county government, there's a graphic on the right side of the slide, and it shows you kind of the overall planning process. So A government would start by creating a comprehensive plan, which is that big long-range vision. From that document, that's where you can start creating your shorter-term 5-year strategic plans. Maybe you do some small area planning, which really kind of refines the goals for specific neighborhoods. And then from those documents, you will then create your work priorities, which become your annual budgets. So from the annual view, you would then move into individual projects and initiatives that can be implemented from those budget priorities. And then finally, you kind of start the process all over again to see, are you working towards your goals? Are you achieving what you said you wanted to? If not, at that point, you're probably getting close to wanting to revise your comprehensive plan to make adjustments. So that's kind of the big process for how all of those different plans kind of work together. Now, we like to use this tree graphic to explain how the comprehensive planning process works to actually create the plan. So first, we're going to focus on identifying what the needs and the wants and the issues are by talking to the community. And that's the phase that we're in right now. The second step is to kind of analyze the data and trends, to look at the regional picture of what's happening kind of around us so that we can have a better idea of what all of those challenges are and what's coming down the line that we know about or that we might be able to imagine. And then we use that information to create a big picture vision for what we want at the community level. And from that vision, we can then draft goals and strategies and kind of action items that we want to focus on. So once the plan is accepted by the community, once it's adopted by the commissioners, then the county can begin making decisions based on the guidance in the plan. So for example, kind of up in that treetop, up in the branches, you can see some of the different ways that the county can use what's in the plan to kind of impact what happens in the community. So we might be able to make some changes to ordinances. We might make budget decisions based on the priorities that the community's told us and all of that kind of stuff. So this is a tentative timeline. We've actually just pushed out the phasing to give us some more time in phase 2. But right now we are working to reach as many residents of the county as we can. We are trying to find ways to overcome some barriers from language, from technology, transportation issues, and COVID has made it really hard because we have had to go back virtual. So we're looking for ways right now where we can still reach people out in the community, even though we're not really supposed to be assembling. Once we get towards the end of phase 2, though, we are hoping to go back to some in-person activities, and we'll be, advertising those and asking people to come out and speak to us in the community. We've got a big focus on youth. We're really trying to get youth input and include it as part of the input with everybody else. And then when we move into phase 3, which will probably be pushed back closer to maybe late spring of 2022, that's going to be the phase where we start to actually draft specific policies and actions that we're going to recommend in the plan. And it's going to be based on the information that we're gathering now in phase 2. Phase 4 is going to focus on preparing the final draft plan for adoption, taking it back to the community and saying, this is what you told us. Is this right? If not, we'll have time to make adjustments again. And then we're hoping to have the plan adopted by the middle of 2023. So one of the ways that we're gathering information is to reach out to individual stakeholder groups like yours. And we are asking, what do you think the county's priorities and actions should be for the future? So that's the question that I'm going to be kind of walking through with you all today. We have so far sent out survey requests to about 172 groups. We keep adding to that as we find more that our stakeholder groups and our steering committees and commissioners feel should be included in this. And this is a different survey than what the general public is getting. So today we're going to be asking you to answer questions from the perspective of your organization, not kind of your personal opinion. And then you can also take the general public survey after this, just on your own, if you want to give kind of your personal perspective outside of this group. So I'm going to be asking you what you think the top planning issues are, what 3 big ideas you have to improve the community, and then what the specific policies or action items are that you kind of have in the back of your mind. So maybe I might just stop now. If there's any questions about the process or the plan or kind of what we're doing, we can just take a moment to answer those.
Anyone have any questions? Okay.
No? Okay. Well, then let's just get into it. Here we've got some different long-range planning issues written on each of the slides, and I'm going to use some of these red and blue buttons to keep track of your comments. But thinking about the mission of your group, what do you feel should be the top 3 priorities that the county should focus on? And we know that all these areas are important and they all will be included in the final plan, but this activity is going to help us to see if there are some areas that need more attention than others. And if there's something missing, I can add them to the other card. But maybe we could just go around, or if somebody wants to just start kind of throwing stuff out, I can move those buttons over.
I see Ben Woody.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to just jump in real quick. So I'm going to do something I'm probably not necessarily supposed to, but so this body has a 5-year consolidated plan that identifies priorities, and they're ordered. So I would just say that, quite frankly, the priorities of this body are in that plan, which I think was done in 2020. So put a link in the chat to the plan. If folks are at home watching, you can go to the city's Community and Economic Development website and also find that plan. And where I think it really ties into Buncombe County's efforts is the county, of course, is responsible for social and behavioral health services, and a lot of that area ties into a lot of the housing needs that exist within the community. And just looking at our plan, the number 1 priority is rental housing for households at 60% AMI or less. And then it goes on to identify the populations that consist of those with special needs, elderly, children with families, homelessness, which we'll talk about later today. So I think a lot of what is important to this body is actually in that plan that's pretty recent and up to date.
Okay. Well, do you all feel like that plan is clear enough that I could go through that and kind of fill out this section for you all? Because I hate to misinterpret something if it doesn't exactly fit with kind of how we are categorizing our focus areas, but I'd be happy to do that if you want to just skip on to some of the action items rather than working on this.
Any thoughts from other consortium members? I mean, the alternative here is to just kind of popcorn out and call some things and let her, looks like, digitally move some stickers. I mean, I see one very obviously: planning for growth, land use, housing, transportation there at the bottom center. But to Ben's point, with this consortium does have a recent plan that may help. For your process sake, I mean, surveys and moving through community engagement, it would seem awkward if we didn't do this step for you. So how about we just take a second and popcorn? Anybody else have any things they add? I mean, I do encourage you, Shannon, to also look at our plan, or we could talk more if it helps. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this exercise. So first of all, Shannon, I appreciate you doing that and being here. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that plan and had access to it. So I certainly think this is a valuable exercise.
Yep, I will definitely take a look at that with our team after this meeting.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to call some out? Maybe this is our only priority.
Good morning. This is Robin. Planning for sustainable infrastructure.
I see that as well. Utilities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Any others we want to highlight?
This is Jacob here. Ben, I appreciate you sharing that. I was trying to get a quick scan and look at that, but I'd say the big ones that I'm kind of focused on here, and Henderson County's doing their own comp plan now that we're trying to pull teeth to get some answers for as well. But fostering economic development while protecting the environment, I see both those just almost go hand in hand. And then, of course, the planning for growth, that's all kind of tied in right there. I'd say there's definitely three big priorities from our area looking into it.
Which one? What was the second one you said?
Protecting the environment there, because it's a balancing act. That's what brings people here. But at the same time, we've got to still develop some of that area at the same time as well, too.
Okay. Any others before we move on?
I would add maybe fostering community health, but especially with the access piece, because I feel like a lot of projects that we fund are also focused on kind of the holistic model of services to an individual, not just housing.
Shannon, I would also probably, as a reflection of the position on this group, put a dot on creating a more equitable community. I think a lot of the focus of our efforts is trying to create equity and access to housing. So I think that probably speaks to that kind of overarching priority.
Great. So
Okay.
if we had to get this list down to three,
Mhm.
what would be the three that you would say need the most attention? Maybe not that they're the most important, but given our county's circumstances, which are the ones that we would want to put the most attention on?
I think planning for growth. I'll just call it a few. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking planning for growth, the land use, housing, transportation, planning for sustainable infrastructure, and creating a more equitable community. Probably are the three that most touch on the things this consortium works on. Does everybody agree?
I
Okay,
think so.
there you go, Shannon.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to move on then to asking you about kind of big ideas that you want the county to support to improve the community. So I can just kind of type your ideas in here as we go. We can add more slides. Think about it like, what do you want the county to put in the comp plan that we will use as our guide as for what we focus on over the next 20 years? So that's kind of what we're trying to figure out. And they can be vague ideas. They do not have to be specific actions. They could be, more like goals if you want.
Shannon, I'm interested in, I think one of our housing issues is compromised, just inventory in general around vacation rentals and losing housing inventory to visitors, I guess. And I'd be interested for the county to speak to that since there are no existing plans or rules around that.
Okay.
Even if just understanding what's happened or the impact. I also think corridor planning, I worry a lot about sprawl, those of us in the city watching these large projects on the periphery pop up and what it means for the corridors in between those, 900 units and the accessible commercial opportunities around there or schools or whatnot. So larger corridor planning.
Okay. Ben?
I'm going to add reliable access to rental housing for low to very low income households. And that probably means some sort of, organized subsidy to make that happen. So.
Big ideas. What do you want for the future of the county? When you think about what you want us to be like, what do you see?
I mean, this is outside what the consortium works on. I don't know that some of this is. I mean, I wanted to talk to an education. I know the county commission is pretty focused on early education and the impacts throughout, livelihoods. And and then there's all this drama and trauma and change happening with the school system. But that's unrelated to this consortium. So I'm having a hard time being a consortium member doing this. So I don't have as many ideas as I will as Sage Personal.
And that's just kind of a great reminder that we have the general public survey, and we are going to be asking a lot of questions that I think you'll have a chance to kind of share all of those concerns there.
What about, density and the ETJ, really, I think is another item on there, and how we're working together on that kind of gray area of our community. Do y'all know about the ETJ? Extraterritorial jurisdiction, the 1 mile around the city that isn't technically in the county, but the city, most municipalities would have some kind of control over it, or, ordinances that stretched into it, because we'd most likely be providing services to it. But our community, our city cannot do anything with the ETJ, and that's not forever. So within the 20 years of this comprehensive plan for the county, the ETJ comes back into focus, or could.
Is that something you would consider a goal, is to have
convene over bases and plan for them? Yeah. And it probably needs to be a joint planning effort. I mean, what's the one that was in the ETJ that was a big deal in West Asheville, the Crossroads? Right.
Yeah.
And if the local governments were able to work together better on them, or had some kind of control over what happens in that, I think it would have been a little better.
Shannon, one for me is zoning, and revamping zoning city and countywide, but certainly countywide, to really facilitate the construction of housing, particularly affordable housing. Dare we use the term inclusionary zoning? But I think a zoning revamp in general is due.
That's something too I can mention, that when you're looking at a comprehensive plan, we can say out loud some of the things we wish we had, even if they are not allowed now. Just knowing that that's a goal for our community can help us kind of to work towards some of those things.
Well, that's a great point. So go ahead and put rent controls up there, and inclusionary zoning, like Robin mentioned, impact fees, go for it. Tax increment financing. Let's list all the things we're not allowed in the state. No, I'm being facetious, but if we can dream. Better partnership with municipalities within the county or neighboring areas. And that's something that is happening more and more, but did not happen for the last couple decades. And in those partnerships, we're seeing the potential for housing. And I think, just learning yesterday, and y'all actually may not know this, but Buncombe County is receiving a guaranteed tax credit award in 2022, and may even have their cap 1 tax award lifted for the year, potentially a second project. But when those, these projects and these opportunities come together, are we all ready to move and act on that? What's our relationship? How are we working together? The relationship to interior local governments.
Another one on the dream list for me is light rail or train service, something you think regional.
Oh, yeah.
How great would that be?
And Shannon,
Bigger
one more.
moves on solar too. Y'all are pushing on that, but community solar, bigger, better.
So one more thing I'd like to add, Shannon, and I know this is something that we talk about, but maybe just an increased focus on. I'd like to see us as a community put a little more focus on small business growth, because I think there is an opportunity in that for higher paying wages, more access to employment, economic mobility. And I think a lot of times we get focused on big companies recruitment, and we should do that. But I think we kind of underserve the small business community sometimes. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth in that area.
I kind of want to even think with that small business growth and thinking of the light rail, just walkability of cities and needs, so you can walk around to those small businesses and still have access to everything within your home, maybe walk to work and go back and forth, go to the grocery store afterwards, support whatever business you could, but still staying within the community there.
So what would that be in planning in the county? I guess that would be nodes, right?
Yeah, I guess it'd be more that partnership, as long as it sort of have like a greenway connected. I guess it won't really be too much walkable, but bikeable to an extent.
Right. Well, and Shannon, what is the number we heard recently? We're going to grow. The county should expect 3,000 new members, new residents a year for 20 years or something.
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
That's what I heard, 3,000 new residents a year. So knowing that, how will we build that housing? How does inventory reach that critical mass? And, another thing we learn about in those Bowen reports is the percentage of folks owning instead of renting is declining. And so I would say protection of or home ownership programs or understanding that loss of ownership, which is really equity in the long haul. Forrest, I think that's you up. I can only see the first letter of everybody's name.
Yeah. Economic development wise, well, it's really everything. I think a focus on the ability for upward mobility for people who don't already have means, which I know is potentially everything, but our strategies regionally should look at what barriers you have for employment, housing, healthcare, everything else, but really focus on how you have that opportunity for all types of people. Sorry, that's so broad.
That's good. That's how comp plans are, very broad. Jennifer, go ahead then, Kate.
I would say improving access to internet and broadband is pretty big here in Henderson County.
Absolutely. Very well. It's just clapped somewhere. Kate?
So I would definitely echo the first 1 and 3 on the first column. It's a little bit hard not knowing kind of in depth about Buncombe County's operations day-to-day currently, but I would say, especially coming from our county's perspective, a lot of people have to travel to Buncombe County for services. And so maybe regional collaboration, especially with transportation, kind of drop off points from one county to another.
Okay.
I think since Buncombe County is kind of the leading county in Western North Carolina as far as size and amenities and residents, maybe it needs to be the lead county for regional planning. I mean, we're going to see an enormous influx. This is a 20-year plan. 20 years from now, what will the climate be like? Will we still have Florida? Will we have, more residents than we ever thought? And how is the county planning land use resources in its neighboring regions? I mean, if the county is going to build, let's just say 3,000 units a year to keep up with 3,000 people a year, what's happening to the available land and acreage after that? And do we need neighboring counties to be partners in better strategies around hubs of, even down to things like landfills, or where's all of the predominant agriculture, and, what is the larger land use planning for the whole western part of the state that Buncombe County tends to lead on? Regional planning, otherwise known as.
I think related to that, Sage, is just the concern about, we're expecting climate refugees here, but we're also going to have some effects of climate change here as well. Like, we don't want repeats of what happened with the flooding in Buncombe and Haywood and Transylvania counties. We don't want the mountainside sliding down. And what are the things that we can do to, keep building off the steep slopes, but in the flat parts and with more density? And how do we protect the river and ourselves from all of these things? And that was really inarticulate, but I hope so.
We're just brainstorming. It's funny to think about 20 years on the fly live. What about some of the stuff around the lodging tax that comes through the county? I would like to see the county continue to push harder on a better, more equitable distribution of tourism lodging tax. And they have the reins on that, whether people don't realize it or not.
You guys are great. We're running out of room here. That's a good thing.
Did we get something for schools on there? Comprehensive school and education planning? I don't know. I mean, it does play into housing and access and where it should be. And
Comprehensive planning for schools.
yeah, 3,000 people a year. Do they have kids? I mean, where are they going to go? We're closing schools. It's crazy. Schools and childcare, really. Yeah. Anybody else? I imagine we can still do this, our personal surveys, and we can still probably reach out to Shannon with follow-up ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to try and sticker our top ones? Is that what's going on there?
I'm hoping to get the top 3 from your group.
I'll be quiet on this one. Y'all go for it.
So one of my top 3 would be first column, fourth one down.
Yeah.
I would suggest second column first.
Zoning.
Yeah.
I mean, either relationships with local governments or inventory as people move, home ownership. I mean, gosh, there's so many. You have 8 little stickers there, though.
Well,
And this, I don't know if this is the method y'all are going to use for other kind of input sessions, but normally if I'm looking at like a red dot, I would think that that's something that we don't want. But that might just be my perception.
I can take care of that.
Shannon, I think if you combined in column 2, 3, and 5, because they're similar, but they're a little differently worded, then I would put a sticker on that one.
There you go. Good call, Matt.
Let's just add them together and yeah. Okay.
Okay. What do we think? Are these our top 3, or do you want us to do those other stickers too? Sorry. Does this look like our top 3, everybody? Some nods or uncertainty?
I think it aligns well with the mission of this body, those top 3. So I feel good about it. So I'll just put that out there.
Okay. I do too.
All right. So this was for big kind of broad ideas. The next slide was about policy and project examples. And I feel like I got some of that stuff from you guys, community solar, light rail, but just really quick, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. Are there any other very specific projects that you'd want to see the county recommend?
I would like the county to have a Luigi program, land use incentive grant program, to mirror the cities.
For the county.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to see a larger, I know the county has been investing in affordable housing just for the last few years and has a new committee, but potentially a larger amount to be spent each year to invest bigger.
That's for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yeah, they do, I think 2 or 3 million, but maybe it should be twice that, 10 times that, I don't know. I guess the county would be the one to, the state is interesting. As local governments, we have to be expressly allowed to do something. And really the only way to challenge that is to try something and face punitive action, I guess. So I would like to see the county push on issues that we had on that previous list of dreams, whether it be rent controls or inclusionary zoning or something, but to continue to push on that, not to just accept it as our fate.
How would I word that?
I don't know.
The state.
One idea that I actually mentioned to some other folks in the city recently was, you may have heard that, and I don't mean to make this so Asheville centric, but Asheville has the highest rents in the state. Did y'all read this article yet?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I read in the article was that the top 10 cities in North Carolina, of which Asheville was included, all faced double-digit increases in rent, in the cost of rent in their communities. And most of them were in the 19, 20, 22% growth increase in the cost of living. So to me, when I see we need state action to improve some of our local government, abilities, then I see the top 10 largest states facing a same issue at the same time and in the media. To me, that means those 10 cities could probably get together and plan something that, make some kind of bill or progress or some kind of state funding for those 10 cities to get a big pool of funding for housing or whatever it is. But if there were ever a moment in time for that partnership to align and those 10 cities to work together, it seems like it'd be now while we have this new study. So if you can make that into one little 10-word box, great. It does seem to be that's how bills really have a chance in this state, when the largest cities really work together on something. So there's an opportunity. Ryan, I know you're not on the consortium, but you are our kind of homelessness leader. I mean, and you've been in other communities. Are there things on here that come to mind, and how we might, the county might be able to pull like 3 things that you know about that might help with the houselessness? Please join our brainstorm.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. Certainly, I think inclusionary zoning is high on that list. And in terms of the funding for affordable housing, having a dedicated, committed source of revenue that's not subject to voter referendum or annual allocations planning would be really helpful. I think, and I do not say this very often, but one thing that the state of South Carolina is ahead of the state of North Carolina on is that community development tax credit that provides a dollar for dollar 50% tax credit for investments made in community development financial institutions and community development organizations. So we have a superb small business CDFI here with Mountain BizWorks. We do not have an affordable housing CDFI, and so I think there's some opportunities to create at the state level that structure for that type of tax credit that brings private sector investment into a variety of mechanisms that can help fund affordable housing. So and I think Ben's comment about realistic access to rental housing, that's a real problem for our homeless population, because you get a housing development done with low-income housing tax credits, and the property management is farmed out to another firm, and they set their tenant screening criteria so stridently that 98% of homeless people are never going to be able to get a unit in one of those kind of developments. So you know, try to coordinate with the state. I know that there's in the qualified allocation plan for tax credits, they certainly get points if they say, well, yeah, we'll provide units for homeless folks, but let's incentivize that and put some teeth in those requirements.
And I'd say even to your point, Brian, because this is something I'm also aware of and concerned about, but building better partnerships with management companies does
Yep.
need to be on that list, because
Yep.
Brian's right. He's speaking to a really tough issue.
Yeah.
Our best intentions and getting things out of the ground and built, and then they still prevent certain people from accessing them.
Yeah.
I have another really random one, but this has been something I've been thinking about. I know the county is too. The county, the city, and other partners teamed up to redevelop Lee Walker Heights into Maple Crest. So my background is in planning, and I remember learning about why we have these public housing communities, why they were made, and urban renewal and all of this stuff. And the intent at the time was those were temporary situations. So I think the county and these governments, we need to have a conversation of, is public housing, are we going to redevelop them and that is the plan? We're going to keep them forever? Or were we supposed to, in a sense, retire them into equity and home ownership? Or should they be redeveloped into ownership opportunities, not rentals, and so on? I think that conversation needs to be had. Was the goal to have them forever? Because I didn't think it was. Any other really random details coming from folks?
If you all think of more, feel free to, shoot me an email or reach out to our team and we can always add them. This phase is going to be open until at least April. So we can always go into your survey results and add some more stuff.
Thank you.
So just to finish up, we are going to take all of this information that you've given today, and I'm going to plug it into your survey. We'll keep that open, like I said, for a couple more months. So if you know other stakeholder groups who really should be included, we can share the survey with them either by coming to them in a live meeting like this, or they can do it on their own with their group. The surveys are going to be used by our planning consultant, it's the firm Clarion, and it's going to help guide them in their final recommendations for what should be included in the comprehensive plan. But as you are kind of watching what's going on, there's different ways that you can be involved over the next year besides this. I had mentioned there's the individual survey on our website that you can take. There's other activities and resources on there as well that you might want to check out. Some great stuff for kids to get their input. And we also have a weekly newsletter that you can sign up for. We're going to be having a bunch of virtual public meetings coming up. Actually, there's one tonight at 6 o'clock on Zoom that you can register for. And we've got another one on the 24th that's going to have a youth focus. So we're inviting high school, college students, especially maybe some middle school kids might want to sit in on that, maybe not, but inviting them through the school systems. And then we'll have 2 in March, and then hopefully we can get some in-person meetings after the 19th of March. So if you all, can check out the website and see what else you can do to share your input, we would love to have you continue to participate. And this is our team, in case you haven't seen our faces before. We've got Jillian Phillips is our division manager for long range planning. I'm Shannon, and we've got Haley Madfis as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Shannon, for being here, and to the county for taking this on. I'm excited for y'all to finally have a comprehensive plan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good luck. Thanks. All right, everyone. We've closed that item. Let me get back to our agenda. Thanks for participating in that, everybody. Next up, we have, for those of you listening at home, we're on item number 3B, 2022-2023 program for home and funding process. Who is going to be updating on that? Where'd you go?
Hi, Chair. This is Nikki Reed. I think between myself and Jonathan, we can help facilitate this conversation if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
First off, I want to say hello and introduce myself to the consortium. My name is Nikki Reed, and since you all last met, I have taken on the role as the Community and Economic Development Director for this department here within the city. So very happy to serve in this capacity, and I look forward to working with this consortium in the next several months. I know there's a lot of work to be done, so I'm excited about getting that started with you all. And also, as you know, Paul D'Angelo had recently held the Community Development Program Director position here in the city. And so, as you may have heard, Paul took another position in Colorado. So we are actually having Jonathan Jones serve in the interim capacity of that role. So thank you, Jonathan, for stepping up and doing that as we look for a permanent hire for that position. So we appreciate everything that Paul did in service to this consortium, and we were sad to see him go. But of course, he was off to a better opportunity for him. So we congratulate him for that. So I just wanted to say hello and just kind of kickstart this discussion with Jonathan's assistance. So as you know, I think our next meeting of this consortium will be to discuss the home funding. So our annual cycle of the traditional home funding process. And we had talked about just looking at that process to understand how we could assist and really better serve the consortium through that process. So I think I'll then turn it over to Jonathan to help walk us through what we're looking at this year in terms of the process that we hope to bring forward to the consortium. So Jonathan, you want to take it?
Sure, thanks. Many of you are aware the community development team released the home and CDBG funding application back on December 17th and shared updates with all of our listservs to let folks know that that funding opportunity was available. The closing date for that was this past Friday, February 7th. So at this point, we've received approximately 11 applications that staff are working through evaluations on, looking at eligibility with home regulations, as well as project capacity, and looking at the funding request and evaluating, where the best investments for these home funds are. The next step in the process will be to share those completed evaluations with the applicants and allow them to address any corrections or concerns that are found there. And then we would follow up as in years past to make recommendations to the Home Consortium for funding. In the past, that's been a single marathon session where agencies were given an opportunity to present their application and discuss that with you all, and then take into consideration any of the staff feedback. What we have been discussing is shifting that process and providing stronger staff recommendations, looking at the limited funding and looking at project history, agency capacity, some of the regulations that staff, we're working through day in and day out, and sort of bringing that professional perspective to bear. And so we are looking forward to bringing those evaluations to you, but also wanting to make sure that our next steps are clear. One of the considerations that we are looking at with the Housing and Community Development Committee at the city is doing a two-step presentation process for applicants to have one session to present their projects, and then a follow-up meeting with committee members, another public meeting for staff to make recommendations. So we would consider the application as well as the presentations. That is still, under consideration. We have the HCD meeting with the city's team next Tuesday, but I think at this point, with those sort of next steps in the queue, I think we had spoken with Sage Turner as the chair to sort of field that option as a way to move forward with applicant presentations.
And I'll just follow up to say, part of where this is coming from as well is that in facilitating the city's ARPA process for the allocation for our ARPA funds, we found that there have been some lessons learned with how that process has unfolded. And I think it's something that perhaps we want to work on here. So just to underscore what Jonathan said, I think what we want to present today is to come to this consortium in March with a 2-meeting approach versus that marathon session, as Jonathan had mentioned earlier, where we will provide the materials to the consortium in advance. Then applicants will be asked to attend 1 meeting to do short presentations. We'll give some time to allow everyone to review the applications, take away their main points from those presentations, and then we will regroup the following week to assess and finalize the allocation plan for the home funds, with staff also supporting this committee and this consortium through recommendations for funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chair to facilitate any questions or provide any additional comments.
All right, yeah. So I'm familiar with this process because, like we just mentioned, we went through it with ARPA, and it actually was very helpful for me and did impact some of my thinking around the application. So how are y'all feeling about that? What do you guys think? Any concerns? Do you like this idea? Do you think it will go smoother?
I'm sorry, I'm going to need a repeat. So the first meeting where people make their presentations, would we be present for that, or would that just be staff?
No, you would be present.
We would be present for that. And then we would take some time in between that and the meeting where we actually make the decisions. Okay.
Correct. Some of this too, you know, with all of the money coming into our community federally, and, you know, the ARPA money for the county, the state, your counties, some of these are the same applicants. Like sometimes it's stepping back to say, you know, are all of these pieces going to make this one applicant whole? And so I think the time to reflect, to hear from them and understand the overall landscape in our county or communities is probably also helpful in that 2-meeting setup. Any concerns? You want to just call it, that's how we'll handle it?
I like that approach. I think in the past it can get a little bit overwhelming in that 1 meeting. So
yeah, it really can. I think if you all recall, I was kind of new to the consortium and trying to navigate and be the chair, and we were, you know, adjusting line items and moving numbers live, and the applicants were sitting in, and it just was a little less, I think it could be a little more organized and procedurally. So I think this is a great move. And if we're not hearing any concerns, let's just proceed that way.
I'm just going to jump in.
Like the 2-meeting approach. I guess I have a question about the criteria. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is Forrest. I have a question about the criteria that staff would use in forming those stronger recommendations.
Nikki, did you want to respond to that? Or Jonathan?
So that would be, in the past, we've provided a basic eligibility review, looking at the HUD regs and saying, you know, is this something that fits with HUD's guidance? But what we want to do is drill down a little bit further and look at the track record of agencies. I know in the past, one of the concerns that this committee has had is partnering with agencies that were unable to complete a project, agencies that have had significant delays or had to return funds. And so be able to provide a little bit more perspective on that as we've worked with partners. And, you know, we've got contracts that still have balances that need to be addressed, and continuing to partner with agencies that can't do that is something that we would like to, as staff, inform this committee what the status on that is, rather than just looking at, is this an eligible use of funds, but also is this a strategic investment of these funds in these projects and in these partners?
And I think that makes great sense. I just want to make sure that that's what I like. That along with the 2-meeting thing gives us all a chance to go and look, because we want to maximize funding in the region, but I want to make sure the staff recommendation is not influenced by other funding that's available solely. I mean, you put the information out there, but City of Asheville, City of Asheville, it's a regional body. What you're saying makes perfect sense. I just want to make sure that we get all that information. I think we will. So I think I like So, thank you.
Yeah, I think it will be more information. Yeah.
And I'll just add, from Buncombe County's perspective, I definitely like this approach. It's similar to the approach we use in allocating our own local resources, is taking a look at our existing partnerships and history, and which of these projects is the most viable project, because we consider everything that we fund with local dollars in a one-time cycle. I think the one thing that might be missing, and it's something we've touched on kind of historically over the last year, is an historical perspective on funding across the region over an extended period of time, just with the mind or the lens of equity, because obviously any affordable housing activities that happen in Buncombe County benefit the region, but also those activities happening in Transylvania or Madison counties benefit. And while we recognize that they're not going to be equitable, we're not going to spend the same dollar amount in every county. To get an idea of how the funds have flowed as we look in allocating additional funds might be helpful, or give us a perspective that we haven't always necessarily had the ability to provide. And I don't know what the time frame is that's appropriate. I don't know that we need to go back since the beginning of the consortium, and members have come in over time that weren't in initially, but just to get, even at the county level, a perspective on what that funding history has looked like.
I love that, Matt. That's a great idea. It's really true. We should understand that every time we begin this process again. Any other questions or comments, concerns, anything? Okay, because the next time we see each other, it's going to be an eventful meeting.
And just one quick thing. I don't know, Christina, do we need to schedule those dates now, or do we want to do that at the end of the meeting, or should we do that now?
I think we should do that now since we're on the topic.
Okay, so I think we had in the agenda, if you look down under item 7, we had planned on Wednesday, March 23rd to do the marathon meeting. But now since we're breaking that up, then staff, are we looking at the week prior? So like the 16th to do the initial applicant proposals on the 16th, and then to the consortium, and then to have that March 23rd date as the allocation meeting.
Yes, I think that makes sense. One of our, I'll call it maybe a tradition, is that the Home Consortium has reviewed the funding decisions and recommendations prior to HCD meeting, because some of the funds paired between CDBG and Home, the Home decisions can help influence some of the case management requests that we get for CDBG. So we would plan on still having the 23rd meeting at the end of March for Home, and then we could have the 16th meeting for those presentations a week before.
Everybody got your calendars out? I see Kate. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to make sure. I thought I was looking at the most up-to-date agenda, and normally all of our meetings are on Thursdays on the 24th.
True. Oh, I know why we didn't, because I'm in an all-day council retreat. I'd love to be with y'all, but I will be in a retreat. But I'm hearing though that March 23rd that's kind of our cutoff. So the second meeting needs to be previous to that. And if we were to say, the Thursday before, I imagine that's getting really tight.
It would be.
And Wednesdays are not an option for folks. That Wednesday, the 16th, no good.
And sorry, the 16th was fine. That was the first I'd heard of the 23rd, and that was the date that I couldn't make.
You can't make the 23rd. Okay. And the 24th. Oh, so the 17th, the Thursday my retreat is the 17th. I can do the 24th if you all can. That's the Thursday. But is there a reason you all had the 23rd?
The HCD meeting at this point is tentatively scheduled for the 24th, delaying.
It's not on my calendar yet. Okay.
Right. Which is to be determined or to be confirmed at our meeting next week.
Okay. So Kate, you can't do the 23rd. Is anyone else not available on the 23rd?
And if it needs to be that day, I can make sure Alan has my recommendations, and I can just share that with him.
If possible. It sounds like the 23rd works for everyone else. I'm sorry to do that to you, Kate.
Is this morning on the 23rd, same time that we're doing?
I think so.
That'll work.
Mhm. Okay. And it would help if we went ahead and got that calendar invite out. I know all of our calendars are probably pretty full. And then, so that puts us to the one before. So the 16th, I cannot do the 17th, unfortunately, but I mean, maybe there's another time, or maybe Robin can run the meeting if needed. I can watch it. It will be recorded. Does everybody need the 16th or 17th?
I'm not available either day, but I can certainly review, online after the fact, what's best and presented.
This is interesting. So Nikki, when we did the ARPA presentations, we watched, we did not ask questions. So we were an active body, all tuned in, really just to watch a recorded video. So I wonder if that changes somehow.
That's helpful, I think,
yeah,
right?
it
Because
interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Those presentations have typically been an interactive event, but if it's recorded, that would also be available for review.
But in the past, we were asking people questions.
Yes.
Okay. Just for
Sage, I guess a question is, when would we anticipate getting the materials? I mean, the other option is, I have an alternate that can participate in the meeting that I'm not there for, and we have that advantage that I have a couple of people
yeah.
to represent the county. But part of that is if I have an opportunity to review it, and there is opportunity for question and answer, which is usually a great learning experience for someone in the meeting. I can certainly kind of put those together. I won't be able to help with on the fly questions, but if I have an idea of when those materials might be available, that will help kind of plan that out.
My guess is it will be very close to that date. I mean, it's already mid-February. So, and we just got the applications on Friday. What about, so Tuesday the 15th, we know we normally meet on Thursdays and we just talked about Wednesday, but the 15th is normal. That would be my HCD meeting, but we're postponing it. So can anybody do the 15th in the morning?
Well, actually, the request from staff at the upcoming HCD meeting would be to use the 15th morning meeting as that presentation session for HCD on CDBG request. An afternoon could be a possibility.
Afternoon, it could just be a day of watching presentations for me. This is hard to schedule live like this, y'all. I'm struggling. So I'm going to either, if it can't be Tuesday the 15th, then we're going to have to do maybe a little doodle poll kind of thing, or I might have to call you guys and round you up. And I can talk with staff about when a realistic time that the materials will be available. I think we just don't have enough answers right now to maybe do this. So last question, can anybody do the afternoon of the 15th? Or how about just say you can, those of you that cannot speak up.
I cannot, but again, I think we're going to have to handle it that
Yeah.
way from our side.
We want you.
We have alternates, right? That's why we have alternates.
Yeah, and that you must be gone all week, so we probably can't get you. Okay, so I mean, why don't we say we need what, 2 hours? Do you all want to say 12 to 2? 1 to 3, 12 to 2?
And we can refine that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I think because
Okay.
I think we can
That's our
shorten that
goal.
meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to set you up for the 15th in the afternoon. We'll get you details, we'll get you materials, deadlines, and we'll email it to you. Great. Okay. So back to our agenda. We're done with that item. We've got those two. We've got a new way of doing it, the 2 meetings, the presentations. It's going to be wonderful. Staff will help with some recommendations. And now we are on to new business, item C, the funding update. And we do have a little bit of a presentation.
And I'll be happy to intro that one as well. So, and thanks for bearing with us on the scheduling. We really appreciate that. So yes, so home, ARP. So I am happy to introduce Brian Husky today. He is within the city's Community and Economic Development Department, currently serving as the Continuum of Care lead. and has graciously offered to present some information regarding the home ARP process. And so, Christina, I'm happy to run those slides, or if you wanted to pull up that slideshow, Christina. Excellent. Okay. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian and let him go. Thanks.
Thanks, Nikki, and Madam Chair, thanks for the opportunity to include this on the agenda today. Christina, if you can go ahead and jump to the next slide. So as part of the American Rescue Plan, there's $5 billion that was allocated specifically to address homelessness in communities across the country. And this is a rather unique allocation of home dollars, not only in that there's some eligible activities with this particular pot of money that are not typically eligible activities for home funding, but also it's very interconnected with other homelessness funding from HUD, in particular Continuum of Care and Emergency Solutions Grant dollars. There are also emergency housing vouchers allocated to public housing authorities in there. So this is all intermingled, but this statement was a joint statement from Martha Fudge, the director of HUD, and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, that, you know, this really is sort of a once in a generation opportunity to reduce homelessness and increase housing stability. So next slide, please. When this announcement first came out, when Paul was still the director of the Community Development Program, he reached out to Donna Anderson, who was a longtime HUD employee, worked at headquarters for a number of years, in particular on the home program. And what she said to Paul was that essentially look at home ARP is that it's a rental housing unit finance program for people who are experiencing homelessness. So, you know, again, the assistance that's provided, some unique opportunities here for, you know, capital investment in permanent housing, for upgrades and increases in our shelter stock, and then in provision of rental assistance and supportive services. So it was allocated with the typical home formula, but again, targeting a specific population here. There's also opportunities to leverage private sector capital. I know that philanthropy is looking at trying to collaborate with these opportunities as well. So it really is a unique pot of funding at a really critical time, because I think the pandemic, we already knew that homelessness is and has for a long time been a crisis in communities across the region and across the nation. And so this alignment of all these resources at the same time, it really is an interesting opportunity that we have here. So, and we had just under $4.7 million that was allocated to our 4 counties in the consortium here. Next slide, please. So a couple of things that I want to also mention, and Jonathan and I were at the same meeting when we heard this, but Norm Suchar, who is the director of the Special Needs Assistance Program at HUD, a question came up in his presentation at this particular conference. The communities are always wondering, how can we get more continuum of care funding from HUD? And his straight answer was, you want more continuum of care funding? Get more homeless people into permanent housing. It's that simple. We know the answer to homelessness is provision of housing and appropriate supportive services. So a focus on housing is certainly very important here. The other thing, in addition to what Donna Anderson mentioned, is that the HUD Office of Inspector General is going to be very closely scrutinizing the use of these dollars not only for the PJs, the participating jurisdictions, but also with the agencies that are going to be recipients of this. So these dollars are funded to eligible, what they're calling qualifying populations. And so there's several that are here, QPs, obviously those who meet the current federal HUD definition of homelessness, those who are at risk of homelessness, and that's a little bit more specifically defined within this particular pot of dollars. Folks who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and then other populations that might be served with particular services or assistance to prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place. And certainly veterans and families that have a veteran member that meet one of these criteria are going to be eligible. I don't want to get into a deep dive in the definitions of each of these. If you really want some detailed, rather soporific reading on it, it's in 24 CFR section 91.5, the definitions around all this. And also in the CPD notice that came out about these funds last September, the at-risk, the sort of the parameters around that, which are a little bit more clearly defined and specifically defined, they're listed in great detail within its CPD notice 2110 that was the announcement for these funds. Next slide, please. So eligible activities. Again, there's some things here that are typically not in the mix of our annual home allocation. But as our consultant, Donna Anderson, mentioned, production and preservation of affordable housing for the targeted qualifying populations, obviously. Tenant-based rental assistance, which is something that we already use some of our annual home allocation for as an eligible use. Something that's a little bit different with this allocation is the eligibility for supportive services for housing programs. We can certainly put somebody in housing, and for our most vulnerable and chronically homeless folks in communities, not only here in Asheville, but in other communities within the consortium, those supportive services are there to ensure that once we get somebody housed, we're able to keep them housed. And so this is unique in that home dollars typically are not, supported services are not an eligible use. So this is special. And then also the purchase and development of non-congregate shelter. And we already see some opportunities that have occurred around that. Related to COVID, City of Asheville, along with a number of communities across the state and across the nation, use non-congregate shelter in motel settings as a way to mitigate transmission risks for really medically vulnerable homeless folks. And so these dollars can be used to acquire existing facilities and renovate existing facilities to be used as non-congregate shelter, or that can be converted to permanent housing at some later point in time. And so that's something, again, typically home dollars would not be an eligible use. I do want to talk a little bit about why these are ordered in the way that they're ordered. And so without getting too deep into the concept of legislative intent, if you care to read all 509 amendments to this bill before it was passed in Congress, there's a reason why this particular list appears in this order, because as far as HUD is concerned, they've made it known in how these dollars are intertwined with our continuum of care funding, and Asheville and Buncombe County are its own continuum of care. The other three counties within our consortium are part of what's called the balance of state continuum of care. So we've got to kind of walk the line of, not only our local Asheville, Buncombe County continuum of care, but the balance of state continuum of care. And what HUD wants to see is measurable strategic impact and reductions in the number of people who experience homelessness. They see a lot of infusion of dollars. They let it be known in the continuum of care application competition for 2021 that we're not going to place so much weight on what they call system performance measures, which are number of people experiencing homelessness, number of people experiencing homelessness for the first time, the length of time that people spend homeless, the number of people we get in housing and keep in housing, and the number of people who have increases in income once they get housed. And so without housing and opportunities to get people housed, we're not going to see significant reductions in the number of folks in our point in time count every year. And so this particular order is there for a reason. And we know that housing is what ends homelessness. And so that's where the priority is. I think Mr. Suchar's comment about you want more continuum of care funding, which we all do, get more people housed. So while we got a little bit less weight placed on those system performance measures in last year's continuum of care funding competition, HUD let it be known that there's going to be even more weight placed on those measures this year because all these dollars are coming into communities that can produce the kind of impact that HUD wants to see on this issue. Next slide, please. So there's preferences and waiting lists that we're going to have to create. And the PJ, the participating jurisdiction, which is the city of Asheville, we can establish some reasonable preferences among the QPs. We've got to establish those preferences based on local housing needs and priorities in each of the communities that has to be detailed in our allocation plan that I'll talk about in a minute. But we've got to prioritize admissions of folks to those projects and assistance and services consistent with the allocation plan, which is going to be very, very data driven. And then we have to comply with all the fair housing and civil rights and non-discrimination requirements that are in the Code of Federal Regulations. People who are eligible for a preference have to be eligible for all the opportunities that are afforded with eligible activities. So next slide, please. As far as folks experiencing homelessness, the preference is really, and this would be for any preference, it establishes only the order in which applicants are selected. They don't make anybody eligible who would not otherwise be eligible for projects supported with these dollars. There is already an existing and efficient system for folks experiencing homelessness. Every community that receives continuum of care funding is required to use it. It's called coordinated entry, where we are prioritizing housing placement for the highest needs, hardest to house, chronically homeless, unsheltered for long periods of time. There's already policies and procedures that exist around this. We're making on at least for Asheville at any rate, on the veteran side, our coordinated entry is a remarkable model of decorum and efficiency. They have lots of resources available that our non-veteran population don't have. So we're trying to make some refinements to coordinated entry. But that's one system that is already there that would not require new policies and procedures. There's already a waiting list with probably 225 people just in Asheville and Buncombe County alone prioritized for housing placement. I'd need to look at the other 3 counties to see what balance of state numbers look like. So next slide, please. So a lot of requirement planning. And Shannon's presentation earlier really set this up nicely, because a lot of the same elements of planning for consolidated plan, for comprehensive plan, are going to have to be part of the allocation plan that we will submit to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So we'll go over the required planning activities, and the PJ at a minimum is required to do consultation with the continuum of care within our geographic area. So that'll obviously be the Asheville-Buncombe NC 501 continuum of care, but also that balance of state continuum of care. We're going to want to talk to homeless and domestic violence service providers, with veterans groups, with public housing authorities, and with any agencies that address the needs of qualifying populations, federally qualified health centers, civil rights and fair housing organizations, organizations that serve people with disabilities. So this is kind of the minimum list, but there may be a much longer list. Some of these consultations with similar types of groups can be bundled together, but some of them are going to be needed to be conducted individually. Next slide, please. The other part, obviously, with any HUD-related planning activity is public participation. So we've got to make known how much money that the participating jurisdiction has received, the range of activities that we can undertake, and we've got to provide for and encourage broad citizen participation. Something we want to do anyway, but it's going to be really critical for this allocation plan. And we've got to follow all the fair housing and civil rights requirements for our communication procedures, including accessibility and reasonable accommodation for the public to access this information, to access the public input portion of it. For folks that have limited English speaking proficiency, we've got to provide for that. And so if we don't have in our existing policies and procedures, there may be a need to look at those policies and create and enact policy so we're in compliance with the requirements to which we're obligated in our allocation planning. So next slide, please. So we're going to have to do a needs assessment, and that's going to be looking at identifying, the size and the demographic composition of those qualifying populations within our consortium, and what are the unmet needs. Around homelessness, we already collect a lot of data around this. Our recently completed point-in-time count, the PIT count, the housing inventory count, which is basically a count of all the emergency shelter, transitional housing, and permanent housing beds that exist within a geographic location. And then there's other data that are available with each individual continuum of care, stuff that HUD already requires us to measure and report on for our homeless population. So identifying some of this, there's existing information, but we're going to have to get into looking beyond that surface level and really dig into the gaps, why they're there, how they might be addressed. So next slide, please. Again, identifying those current resources that are available, what shelter beds they have, both in congregate, non-congregate shelter units, what supported services are available, tenant-based rental assistance, which we support in our normal annual home allocation. But rental assistance is meaningless if you don't have actual units in which those rental assistance dollars can be used. So creating that inventory of available and accessible housing units for our qualifying populations is going to be really critical to success here. What are the characteristics of each qualifying population, not just the one or two that we might really feel like our consortium needs to focus on, but we've got to describe the characteristics of all those qualifying populations. And then we're going to have to prioritize the needs for each of those QPs and what's the level of needs and gaps for each of those. So next slide, please. So what happens, we get this allocation plan together, we have to provide a reasonable notice and an opportunity for the public to comment on the proposed plan, our initial draft, as it were, no less than 15 calendar days. And then if there are amendments to what we have drafted, we'd have to do the same thing again. And then once the plan is, we've got to have at least one public hearing during the development of the plan. But once the plan is developed, we've got to have at least one more public hearing prior to submitting it to HUD. I would hope, again, if we're seeking broad citizen input on this, we'd have multiple public hearings in multiple communities, in multiple settings. I'm hopeful we can do some of these in person. Some of it we can do by survey. There's lots of different ways that we can get that input, but one is the bare essential minimum. Next slide, please. So just those required elements, again, summary of our individual consultation process and what the results were, what we learned from those individual agencies and groups within communities. We're going to have to summarize the contents received in our public participation process. And if we decide not to accept any comments or recommendations, why? And then again, a detailed description of our qualifying populations within our consortium, and then a detailed assessment of those unmet needs. Next slide, please. Again, that gaps assessment, we've got to summarize what we plan to do with these dollars for eligible activities. We have to quantify the number of housing units that we will produce or preserve with this allocation. And we've got to describe what are the preferences, how are we going to prioritize individuals and families in particular qualifying populations or specific segments within those qualifying populations. We've got to describe those in some detail. So I think in the folder that's available to you, there is a template for the allocation plan. We certainly encourage you to review that template. That's what we'll be using as this plan gets fleshed out and developed. So next slide, please. So after that public comment period, we submit it. If we don't hear anything from HUD in 45 days, we can assume that it's substantially complete and consistent with the purposes of home dollars allocated under the American Rescue Plan, or we might get a notice that it's substantially incomplete if we haven't done all the public participation and consultation that we're supposed to do, if we haven't included all the requirement elements in the CPD notice, if we haven't identified and described responsibilities of any sub-recipients or contractors that are going to be involved in the administration of this award, if we decide we want to do some collaboration on how these funds are administrated, or if they just reject our certification is incomplete, inaccurate altogether. If number two happens here, we got to go back to the drawing board. And so the allocation plan, all the activities to produce it are very prescriptive, and we don't want to miss the target on this one by not doing some of this stuff. So next slide, please. Estimated timeline here. I want to emphasize that some of these can run simultaneously, and this is an estimate, and there's some assumptions within this estimate. I think for those initial consultations, the public engagement, data compilation, and analysis, I think those three are pretty self-explanatory. 90 days around those consultations, roughly. For public engagement, if we really want robust citizen participation and input, 90 to 120 days. Again, some of that could run concurrently with what's happening in phase 1. Phase 3, we can't really do data compilation and analysis until we've kind of completed phases 1 and 2, and we really know what our qualifying populations look like, and then what are the unmet needs. And then phase 4, what I call the 5 Ps. So a lot of people know those as proper planning prevents poor performance. And I think that certainly applies here, but in this case, it's really priorities, preferences, our processes, and then our policies and procedures around the use of these dollars. And so that's going to include the establishment of what our priorities as a consortium are, what our prioritized who are qualifying populations, what focus we might want to have, the creation of a project funding application process, the evaluation tool, setting up the actual application, creating all that. You know, that's all part of the establishment of those 5 Ps. And during all that, we're going to need to establish contract templates for a variety of different types of activities that may get funded under this particular funding pot. I think a minimum of 30 days for once we have everything together to actually compose and have the plan ready to submit. Once we issue a request for proposals, I would recommend at least a 60-day period of time in between when the announcement is made and when the deadline for applications is. We need 30 days to probably evaluate those, contracting 30 to 60 days for all that. Again, some of these can run concurrently and simultaneously, some not. I want to stress that this is a lot of this is contingent on there being a staff person dedicated to this, some dedicated administrative support to this. And with some of this, we as the participating jurisdiction are going to be looking to our partners within the consortium to help with a lot of these activities that are part of the planning process here. So next slide, please. So Mission Impossible, your mission, should you decide to accept it. We want to know who, at least in this initial phase, is our point of contact for your town or your county. And that may change as we get deeper into this, but we'd like to have that name of that initial point of contact, and it may be those who are in attendance here today, it may be others, but we need one point of contact for communications to get the ball rolling. I personally would like to see that by close of business tomorrow if we could get it, but early next week would be great. When you look at that allocation plan, and if you look at the CPD notice, there's a list of stakeholder groups and agencies that we're going to be required to meet with in those consultation meetings in that process. And then if you don't already have these items, but know the best sources for them, you know, as has already been mentioned, we have a consolidated plan for the consortium. Some of the information for the allocation plan for these dollars can come from the con plan. Some of it can come from comprehensive plans that already exist, or some that are beginning to get underway here. So Buncombe County's timing on this is really good. Any annual reports, strategic plans, other similar materials that identify what you've got, what you need, what the outcomes of some of your investments have already been in your local communities, and what are the long-term community plans or goals that you have for the prioritized qualifying populations. Those items, we'd really like to get as much of that information within the next week or so as we possibly can, because we want to hit the ground running on this. Although there's a long timeline for the expenditure of these dollars, again, the way these dollars interconnect with HUD continuum of care dollars and the improvements that HUD wants to see in reduction of the numbers of people who experience homelessness. Let's prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place if we can. Let's open up the stopper at the bottom of the bathtub on the other end, turn off the spigot, prevention, open up and create those permanent housing opportunities and supported services. And I firmly believe that we have, as mentioned before, a once in a generation opportunity to end homelessness in our communities with these and other dollars that can be leveraged, and with the unique opportunity that we have with so many resources and collaborations already happening. There's an opportunity here that probably won't come around again anytime soon. If it certainly is not going to come around in my time left working, maybe not in my lifetime even, but this is a really special, unique opportunity. And I think HUD wants to see impact. We have the opportunity to do it. So we're going to be looking to you in your individual counties and municipalities for help with this particular list. And so this is our ask of you today to get this information. I'll serve as the initial point of contact to receive this information from you guys, but I'll let Nikki speak to where we are in the planning for staff position around this, and then after that, I'm happy to take any particular questions that you have about what we've got going on here with this opportunity. So, Nikki, anything you wanted to add, or Councilwoman Turner?
No, but I just want to say, we're getting close on time. It's a lot of information. So Nikki, go ahead and summarize, and then if we have questions, let's do that. And I'm kind of making a list of things we need to do.
Yep.
I appreciate
Nikki,
Brian and the comprehensive update. I think we're good to now, and I think our commitment today is that we will continue to update this committee on progress and be our really primary point of contact in terms of the overall project management reporting up here, so that we can keep everybody in the loop and have your partnership in moving this forward. So thanks again, and thanks to Brian for presenting today.
Great. Yeah. And any questions, because it was a lot of information y'all just got, and some of you are probably already familiar with some of it, but any questions for Brian? Okay. And there was a rough timeline in there. I'm going to assume that everybody's just okay, and there's a lot to absorb. I did hear a call from Brian to get these point of contacts for each community. So I'm going to kind of throw you into the fire here for Transylvania. Kate, can you get with Brian? Woodfin, Adrienne isn't with us. I'll reach out to her. She was absent today. Marshall, Robin, can you reach out to Brian, be the person? Mayor Blakely, if you or your alternate can handle for Fletcher and get in touch with Brian, please. Karen Keene is not with us. I'll reach out to her about Mars Hill. Forrest, if you can get in touch with Brian about Madison County. Jennifer, you're new, but if you can reach out to Brian for Henderson, and Archie, if you will tackle Black Mountain. I think we've got everybody. Matt, you're on here for Buncombe County. I assume you guys are already talking. The only other group not in that list, I think, is Brevard, but we don't have somebody present to represent them, so we'll have to sort that out.
I can, Sage, I'm happy to reach out to their staff and just pass along what we talked about today.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And I will get with Karen. Okay.
Right.
Great. No other questions for Brian? All right, we have some tasks and some big stuff coming up. Thank you so much for being here and explaining all that, Brian. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's get back to this agenda. Coming up, we are moving on to item number 4, old business, and we're running low on time. So we've off and on talked about this environmental review in the past. There's an update in the link here. It's settled, it's solved. If Jonathan needs to speak to it, you can. Otherwise, we're just going to plow past it. There's your resolution. It's in the link. And we need to talk about updated consortium agreements for Mars Hill and Marshall. Jonathan, did you want to talk about that? I see you nodding.
No, the contents of the environmental review, that's been resolved, and staff are working with the city's legal team to figure out the best way to proceed to get the two communities added to our consortium list. So
Great.
that's still in progress. But we're getting there.
Okay, and Robin has to run. Okay, thank you. Those two things are still in the works. And item number 5 is updates and news. And you have a spreadsheet here for our home projects. As you know, we had late to contract. This is really just information only. Did you want to review it?
I will say I think the important point is that our FY 2021 and FY 21-22 action plan amendments were accepted by HUD on January 25th. So some of that incorporated changes from the last funding meeting and will allow us to begin going to contract with some of the most recent awards. That was sort of like the next step in our process, was to get that approval from HUD.
That's great. I can see the notes in here, contracts pending and so on. That's great. It's a lot of work. Okay. Any questions or comments about this particular home list?
I just had a quick comment and question. First, I like this simplified format from what we've seen before, so thank you for that. And secondly, I think something that would be helpful, because some of these projects predate those of us on the consortium, even those of us have been around for a while, is if we could just get a couple more pieces of information on this going forward, including like impact. So, this investment is 77 units of impact, or kind of what the anticipated delivery of the project is going to be. And I recall some of them, some of the assistance is for permanent supportive housing. I think that a couple of key pieces of information, just so that we can kind of remember without having to try to find that original application, would be helpful. Just as we monitor these projects, I think that would be great for us to have. Thank you again.
Thank you, Matt. Kate, go ahead.
Just going off of Matt's comment earlier, I wonder if this would be an easy place to put. I know some of the places have where the activity is located, but I wonder if this would be an easy way to just include which county that project is located in.
I like that. Okay.
I think some of that basic profile information could be added easily.
It does see it in the activity a little bit, but yeah, not all of them express where they're located. Yeah. Okay. Any other input? Okay. This is good. Okay, so, oops, my phone. All right, so we have completed item number 5, and we are moving on to item number 6 for those of you listening at home, which is public comment. We did not have anyone call in before. Do we have anyone live now? I'm not sure who that staff liaison is.
This is Christina Harris. We do not have any public comments in the speaker queue at the moment.
We gave so much information, there are no comments. All right. Okay, then item number 7 was us scheduling our meeting. And as you know, we'll be reaching out to you about the exact time. I saw that Christina was already swift in sending out a calendar invite to hold that day. So check your email, reserve that on your calendar. We may adjust the times. Otherwise, that is the next time we will be together. And if there are no other questions or concerns or items, then we will adjourn. Any last minute thoughts or shares? Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. Please do follow up with Brian before you forget, if you're the point person for your city or region, and we'll see you all in March. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.